Got it. Cool. Thanks everybody for joining our call today. I want to introduce you our key speakers for today's event. Today's our third session, like Diana mentioned. We have Dhruv Patel. He's a senior solution architect at UiPath, and Dhruv is very well versed in harnessing the power of automation, AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and cloud technologies. Thank you, Dhruv, for coming and attending today's call. Next up, we have Russel Alfeche. Russel is a technology leader at RPA Cubotica, and he's also a UiPath MVP. Russell has also been actively involved in helping out the first and second developer session. Russell, thank you for your thought leadership and thank you for organizing the previous events. And I'm very excited to hear from you, both you and Dhruv today. Before we move on to the session, I want to give a special thanks to our previous speakers, George Roth and Scott Schoenberger, for attending the previous sessions. Their leadership, their product leadership was very insightful if you attended the previous calls. So I want to thank them for coming here ahead of their very busy schedule. Last but not least, I want to thank the UiPath America's Community Manager, Diana Gray. Diana, thank you for your brainchild. This is your brainchild of organizing an AI, generative AI and LLM session. Thank you for making this event session a reality. I know with feedback that we got, a lot of RPA developers, AI ML enthusiasts have found this series to be very insightful, useful, and helping their career. So thank you for your efforts to organize a wonderful event like this.
Thank you.
Absolutely. That being said, I'll be handing over the floor to Russell and Dhruv.
Awesome. Thanks, Sharon. So, already got a little introduction there, but again, just nice to meet everyone. Dhruv Patel was a sales engineer, now doing more solution architect type work on our incubation team. So we focus a lot more on generative AI and how it can really help customers actually operationalize, right? Generative AI plus AI into their different solutions and use cases. I'll skip ahead a couple of slides. So today we'll talk a little bit about LLMs, generative AI. We'll give you a little bit of an overview of the UiPath platform, where AI is both from a product perspective, as well as how we're facilitating the integration so that you can start to use it within your automations. We'll talk a little bit about some examples, some patterns of really how to think about how to use generative AI within your automations, really kind of help you spark some ideation and get a sense of what might be some good use cases, or at least some good initial use cases to start exploring when you're trying to bring generative AI into your automations. And then lastly, Russell has some use case examples with a deep dive into an LLM and automation framework, which he'll cover, and you'll get to see a little bit of a demo there as well. Awesome. So, to talk about where we're really bringing generative AI into the UiPath platform and, providing it for our customers and users to really start using within their automations and through our products, we're really kind of bringing it in these kind of two buckets, right? Ultimately, these three different ways of bringing it into the product. One is going to be through the developer experience, right? So you may have heard things like Wingman, and some other kind of capabilities around Studio, where we're bringing in and infusing generative AI to speed up the development effort. So we're focused on adding that into the platform there. From a product perspective, right, things like document understanding, we're bringing in capabilities around GPT and using GPT for classification and extraction. And so we're, again, bringing more of that capability into the products and into the offerings that we have for customers so that it's easy to use those LLMs within your automations through our product. Now, lastly, we're also exploring novel use cases. So really the focus of today is going to be a lot more on those novel use cases and how you can start developing your end-to-end automations and start to tackle those next level scenarios and some of those complex scenarios by using generative AI and plugging it into different parts within your automation and how to really think about plugging it in. So you may have seen, in the past, a stacking kind of platform view where it was discover at the top, then you had automate in the middle and operate at the bottom. That is still, our automation platform. But when we take that next level deeper and really focus in on where the automation platform is powered by AI, this is going to be that side that kind of brings everything together. So to walk you through it, right, in the beginning here, you see in this top bar, we have solutions that are powered by AI. And so when you're using these different products, these different solutions that we offer, you're using AI and machine learning. In some of the areas like document understanding and AI Center, you're going to be able to use a lot of specialized AI. And then we're also going to be bringing in some of that generative AI capabilities to those areas as well. Things like communications mining and clipboard AI, those already have flavors of LLMs and generative AI built into them to really help maximize some productivity. And they're kind of more on that newer end of the solutions that we're bringing in. And there's a whole host of AI capabilities through a lot of the other solutions that we offer as well. Now, going into the second layer, we have really two buckets when we think of AI, right? Specialized AI. This is something that you're probably more familiar with. It's a lot of the AI and machine learning capabilities that you have access to out of the box, right? A lot of our pre-trained models that a lot of customers will take, train on their own documents for their own use cases, and then really deploy within their automations. But now we also have connectors through our integration service to allow you to seamlessly bring in and start taking advantage of some of those generative AI foundational models as well. So really handy way to, within the platform, use a combination of specialized AI plus generative AI to really solve those end-to-end complex scenarios. Now you'll notice on the left-hand and right-hand side of this slide here, we have something that lists out context and something that lists out actions. So part of using AI and machine learning is providing context, right? From your different sources, from people, from your different systems, knowledge bases, documents, right? To those different AI models to actually get an output from them, right? And get an output that's tailored to the context or to the unique use case that you're trying to solve. And so because the UiPath platform can interact at the UI level, the API level, and has best-in-class capabilities around that, you're going to be able to grab all the context you need, pass it to a generative AI model, a specialized AI model, a combination of the two. And then the output of those models, you can actually go and take action on, right? Again, automation being that muscle, right? That's really surrounding this brain of AI and actually operationalizing the capabilities of the AI and machine learning models that you're using. And lastly, at the bottom, we have this AI infrastructure layer. We've always had a lot of these capabilities built into the platform, but now really framing them around using AI and machine learning and how to think about using some of these capabilities there, right? First and foremost is auditability. We have full end-to-end auditability, traceability. You can add your own custom logging, right, to your automations, and all that lends itself to making sure that you can understand and be sure you know how AI is being used within your organization and through your automations, right? Who's using it? How are they using it? What are the prompts they're sending it? And what are the outputs that they're getting from it? For the specialized models, right, we have those fine-tuning and active learning capabilities with human in the loop, right, through Action Center, and you can send that data back to those models in AI Center and kind of continuously fine-tune and iterate on top and improve those models further. But now Validation Station takes on an additional benefit, especially in the context of generative AI. As good as generative AI is, you still want to go in and have some human oftentimes look at the output, right? Review the results, because we've all heard about hallucinations or the potential for generative AI to get things wrong. And so having a seamless way for a person to review the output of generative AI is going to go a long way to making sure that you're using generative AI effectively, but also in a safe and kind of controlled manner within an organization. And so that's really where Action Center takes on kind of that next level of safeguarding and control around how you bring in some of this more emerging technology into your automations and into the organization. Now, when we talk about generative AI and using those connectors and bringing in those foundation models into your automations, it really is more than just calling that generative AI model, right? There's a lot more to the process and how you design it that you want to take into account. First and foremost being context gathering, right? I mentioned it earlier, but the output of generative AI is only as good as that input. And so the more context, the more data, the more information you can provide that's relevant to your use case, to your organization, the better that output's going to be. And UiPath can really help with getting that data from all those different sources in an automatic way. Complementing the generative AI interactions with specialized AI, I mentioned that earlier, where you're building out these orchestrated processes where you're choosing what AI model to bring in when, that's going to be helpful in really tackling these more complex solutions and really bringing in the right AI model for the job. Robots do the work. And I mentioned earlier that brain and muscle kind of analogy. And that's also part of this, right? Today when you interact with generative AI, it's all you give it some data and it gives you data back. But the power then becomes is how can you actually execute off of that and actually do things downstream, right? Fully complete that end-to-end scenario and do the end-to-end process steps automatically. And automation is positioned uniquely to do that. Human in the loop, I won't re-say this again, but it's really important, right? Gen AI can hallucinate, and there's times in certain processes and scenarios you can't get things wrong. And so having a human at least review the output is going to be a much better solution than just having the generative AI output kind of blindly go through. Now, lastly, competence and governance, right? You mentioned the traceability, the transparency, that whole AI infrastructure layer. Having the governance that's built into the UiPath platform is going to make sure that when you bring generative AI into your organization or into your automations and use cases, you're doing it in a controlled, traceable manner that can comply with any regulations or compliance or just any kind of safeguards that you need to have in your organization. Now, how do we think about using generative AI in automations? We all have a general sense of how these LLMs or generative AI models work, right? We've probably interacted with ChatGPT or Bard, and if you haven't, definitely encourage you to start playing around and see how they work. But really, how do you start to think about those capabilities in the context of an automation and really where to plug it in? Now, what we've done here is really broken down the ways you can use generative AI within your automations into really 3 patterns. These patterns aren't kind of the definite only way you can use the LLMs, but they really try to help break down how an LLM is used into kind of more bite-sized buckets so you can start to think about where to plug it in. Now, you'll probably notice a lot of the use cases are going to use one or multiple patterns kind of built together, but hopefully this gives you a good starting point on kind of where to start entering it into some of your use cases. So the first pattern, reader writer, it's all about getting a lot of data. UiPath can go to all those sources, grab a lot of data, grab a lot of information, provide it to the LLM in a prompt template to read that information. And in this scenario, we're really asking the LLM to go and write something based on that information. It could be to write a new email, write additional content, or take that information and turn it into smaller text or expand upon that text or information that it's getting. Right, so we're really asking it here to write something based off of the information that we're passing to it. Kind of the next evolution of that is the analyst doer pattern. We're still getting data from all these different sources, but this time when we're giving that data to the LLM, we're asking it to do more of an ingestion and analysis of that data and output some more structured information. So that could be validating 2 data tables together. That could be analyzing the data to produce more data, analyzing that data to normalize it, add additional data points, make it more structured, fill in missing data, and then ultimately also choose the next best action based on the data that's looking at. And what we can do at UiPath is then actually act on that next best action, right? So again, being that muscle to the brain and the decisions that are coming out of the LLM model. Now, finally, pattern 3, this is going to be a lot closer to what you're already used to if you have been playing around with ChatGPT and Bard. This is where, right, you're conversing with some conversational interface. Behind the scenes is an LLM that's driving some of the answers and responses. But you could take that a step further, and you'll see a little bit of that in the demo that we show later. But UiPath can help provide additional knowledge, provide additional context to the LLM so that the responses, again, are more tailored to your data, your information. And then even if the LLM wants to have an action or decides that there should be an action to take, UiPath can go and actually execute on that action on behalf of the person, both attended or in an unattended fashion. Now, I'll also mention, coming in October, we're going to be coming out with our own UiPath all-encompassing solution for this pattern 3. So definitely, be on the lookout for a big forward event and some of the news coming out of that in October. Now, I won't spend too much time. We will provide these slides for you to look at and review, but just to go through these different patterns, what we've done is expanded upon these. Right now, you'll see some kind of more generic, all-encompassing, across-the-board type example use cases for where these types of patterns can fit into automations, right? Things like email summarizer, KYC or know your customer summarizers, helping with providing feedback responses to customers. There's a lot of different use cases that you can use to kind of start thinking of where to plug in generative AI from a pattern perspective. We've done the same for things like pattern 2. One example, which I have shown in the past, and we can of course provide this video too, is a two-way match demo. And an example of the LLM actually analyzing the data is we take two tables, we pass it to the LLM and we ask it to compare the table data and make sure that everything's matching, make sure the right line items are matching up, their quantities are the same, their prices are the same, and their totals are the same, and there's no discrepancies. And if there is a discrepancy, we can easily go and have human in the loop to validate. So a really cool way to see that analyst-doer pattern kind of in action. And as well, I mentioned, right, there are different patterns for this 3 kind of assistant method, right, different kind of more specific use cases depending on the industry or the type of use case you're looking for, right, help desk, legacy system augmenter, localization assistant, buyer assistant from a supply chain perspective. And then again, we're going to be coming out with our all-encompassing solution for this come October, so definitely be on the lookout for that. Now, lastly, I did want to cover that we just released our UiPath prompt engineering framework. So a big part of what you do when you're building out automations with LLMs is trying to figure out what's the best prompt to actually achieve the goal that I'm looking for as part of this automation with the LLM. And so this prompt engineering framework is available for free on our marketplace. You can go and download it today. It's going to actually allow you to plug in multiple LLMs and really test different prompts and see how using those different prompts can give you different types of outputs and really play with all the configurations that are there within your automations or within the LLMs that you're allowed to kind of configure. And based on interacting with the form, so it's a form that pops up and allows you to kind of make some changes, adjust your prompts on the fly. You can then store those prompts within Orchestrator to be used later on within your automations. So really handy way as you think about, over time as these LLMs continue to change and you have a use case where you built it on one LLM, but you want to try to switch to a different LLM, this is going to be a great way to really test out that LLM, make sure you have the right prompts in place, and really make sure you built out the right prompt templates to use within those automations and plug in those different LLMs. Awesome. So with that, I will stop sharing and pass it over to Russell.
Awesome. Thanks, Dhruv. I'll share my screen real quick. Screen 2. I hope everyone can see my screen right now.
Yeah, I can see it. It says contextual LLM interaction.
Great. Thanks.
Sure.
Oh, Diana. Sorry. Yeah. So awesome overview, Dhruv, and one of the probably key takeaways with the power of having UiPath being able to interact with LLM is the platform being able to provide the context, because more than 80% of the use cases I've encountered personally interacting with customers wanting to implement Gen AI or LLM revolves around interacting with unstructured sources and extracting entities, Q&A with your documents, summarizing documents, or simply knowledge-based or custom knowledge-based interacting with your own data, basically. And if there's one thing in common around this very, very basic concept, yet impactful use case around being able to interact with your own data, the one thing in common is context, right? Getting the relevant context to fit into your LLM. And context comes in many forms. It can come from web pages, it can come from video transcripts, documents, so whether it's structured or unstructured database or data sources. And every organization has a treasured trove of this data or information, but the challenge is when using it to an LLM can only fit you can only fit so much of this data. Let's say you have 1,000 pages like contract, right? Or million rows of database. You can only fit a few chunks or tokens into LLM in order for it to provide an output, right? Without resorting to retraining or fine-tuning the model, which then would require vast amount of compute resources to accomplish, right? So so let's talk about one of the core concepts in natural language processing, which is embeddings, right? And how it relates to context, right? So embeddings basically is like different words such as beautiful, like pretty, like awesome. So they all have meanings, right? They have synonyms. And if you put them together, they make up a sentence, which make up a thought, right? Embeddings basically are the numerical representations of those thought meanings, in which if you plot these numbers into a graph, right? Words or thoughts that have close meanings are near are plotted nearby in the graph, or the coordinates are plotted in the graph. And this in this graph is, it cannot be viewed in just a 2D diagram. It's a multi-dimensional diagram. So it requires lots of compute power in order to compute these embeddings. And that's where really why these companies with large data center or compute power are be able to train with this different large language models, right? So with that said, if you are able to relate relevant chunks or paragraphs or sentences or thoughts together, right, from your treasure trove of data containing millions of rows, you would be, and given a particular, let's say, question, you will be able to get the most relevant chunk or context from that large database and be able to fetch that just by providing a question. So that's what we call semantic search, right? Using a query or prompt or message that you query within a vector database. So embeddings are being stored in what we call vector database, and in order to get the most relevant context, there is what we call semantic search, and this context can then be used into querying to provide a more useful prompt into your model, right? So how does this work? How can we use this like concept when it comes to interacting with LLM, right? So if you have a knowledge source, and knowledge source can be, as I said, can be a database or web page or video transcript, anything, any type of document, PDF document, CSV, Excel file. So those are knowledge sources, right? So this can then be pushed into a vector database after being converted into embeddings, which embeddings are, as I said, numerical representations of these different data sources that you have, right? So once you've ingested that, then you could be able to converse using this relevant information. So provided a user input, let's say, what's the capital of like Philippines, for example. So it will then be pushed in. It will then be using a semantic search or semantic similarity into the vector store, and then it will get the most relevant chunks of text out of that vector store related to your question, and then it will be injected into your prompt, so that you don't really have to push all the data that you have in your database into the prompt, which is really impossible, right? And then you get the most relevant reply out of it, right? So one of the benefits is, of course, it lets you conserve your tokens when interacting with this large language model, and also get the most accurate or non-hallucinating response out of your model. Right? And if we compare, as I mentioned briefly, fine-tuning, retraining, and all that. So if you compare fine-tuning versus context injection by semantic search, this is how it looks like, right? Fine-tuning is not really something that like developers or individuals would do. It would be companies having resources, good amount of resources to particularly train or fine-tune a model. Even if it's just fine-tuning a specific layer in that LLM, it's still very time-consuming, gathering the data, very slow. And the purpose of fine-tuning is not really to teach the model new information. The purpose of fine-tuning is teaching a model a new task. What is a task? Task is basically like writing a poem, generating codes, writing an email, right? So those are new tasks, but you're not, the purpose of fine-tuning is not to provide more information, let's say, information about your own company's product, information about the competitive's product. So if you just wanted to feed a model or an LLM with new information, the best approach is using what we call, or what I just showed you earlier, context injection by semantic search. This way, you're not really training the model, you're just feeding relevant information to the model, and it can recall or extract that exact information, right? And adding information is really a cinch, right? So yeah, and fine-tuning is not meant for Q&A. Right? Again, most common use case that we've seen, chatting or conversing with your own data, and what's meant for Q&A is this context injection by semantic search. Right? So, okay, in fact, not all large language model can be fine-tuned, right? And again, it's not that easy as it sounds. In fact, it's only recent that OpenAI released the ability to fine-tune their 3.5, GPT 3.5. So what I did, I have this hobby project that I worked on past few weeks or months, which tries to capture exactly these types of use case and make it easier to develop and materialize this into automation, right? Quick overview of this LLM framework, what I call is, the problem is trying to solve is that we want to harness the power of generative AI, but their effectiveness again depends on the quality and quantity of the data or the information streamed with, right? Which can be a limiting factor because without the being able to incorporate your own sources, they tend to hallucinate. And it will require proper integrations of framework and guardrails to make them useful to enterprise use cases, right? So the solution that I built for this is this LLM framework template combined with custom activities I built for UiPath, which I'm planning to release next few weeks, right? But this is just more a sneak peek of what this solution is, right? And it's basically two things. One is LLM-powered custom activities using LangChain framework. I'm not sure if you've heard about LangChain. This is, I think, considered as the standard when you're developing large language model application. To makes it easier. The model, you can interact with different large language models. You can define prompt templates, output parsers, interact with vector stores. So this is the custom activity that I built, and this is exposed as an API. So basically, this custom activities interacts with this Python API that I built using LangChain, right? And first, custom activity is ingesting knowledge source, which basically just create and serializes your sources, any type of sources. It can be CSV, PDF, YouTube links, Word document. It currently supports these different sources. You just provide a path or you just provide the URL, and then it will generate embeddings, push it to the vector store, right? And then the next activity is converse with context, right? This is, again, not just calling large language model, right? Although one of the main component in what we call LLM chain, or the large language model. So this is not just calling large language model. So this is a combination of different things. Like, one of the important thing is large language model, right? Whether it's OpenAI, GPT, or I added support right now for Anthropic Claude 2, right? And then the prompt template, of course, it can be the system template and the user template, right? So for now, I made it so generic though that it can be able to converse with any type of sources, right? You just provide your question, it will be able to get the context docs coming from the just knowledge source, right? And then, of course, memory and history, right? So the reason why it's called LLM chain is it's not just a call to LLM, because it's a chain of this different components working together in order to generate the most appropriate response that you need and be able to be used as conversational in the on conversation, let's say, right? This is stateful, right? If you just call on the completions API or the chat completions right now, let's say in OpenAI or Claude, they are stateless, right? This activity is stateful because it's memory backed. It has your chat. For every session when you run this in UiPath, like one session or job runs, you have the full memory or chat history or conversation history, interaction history with the LLM. And of course, you can provide the specific context that you want to interact with, right? So these are the two custom activities. And then it was framework support for conversational use cases, meaning you provide a message and then you provide the data or source you want to interact with, and it will provide a response. And this has memory, long-term memory built in. And transactional, you provide an input coming from a queue, like contracts, and then it will process, and then probably human in the loop. So I will show that later as well. I will show the LLM framework, how you can use with these activities, right? So, but first, let's see how the basic usage looks like for this before we go into the framework. So for this example, I'm going to be showing like 3 different sources, right? And this is just to simulate, let's say, interacting with this type of source, and then these are your sequential questions, let's say, and then after this question, it will be interacting with this source, and then these are your question, and then lastly, like a YouTube video, and then this is your question, and then last question will be this one prompt, right? So let's say the content of this one. So this is a extract from orchestrator, list of queue items. Let's say I'm investigating a particular issue within some of the queue items. So so that's why. So what are the unique queue items? Enumerate top 3 items that took longest to complete. And this one, a PDF file containing an appointment that I have. So just showing you these different sources, right? And then lastly is a YouTube video, 12-minute YouTube video, right? With the link that was provided here, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to the this one, right? So, so I'm going to run this simple sequence, right, to feed into this input and be able to go over each source and each question and be able to fill up the response here. And as it goes through, I'll explain what's happening. And then after, I'll explain the activities that I just mentioned to you, by the way, is right here, right? Ingest knowledge and converse with context, but I'll run this now. Oh, hold on. I have to, so this is, I have to run this. So this is the back end. So I'll be, when I publish this to Marketplace, I'll be, I have a Docker image of this. So this, you can be able to easily host it on your own remote machine or probably do some exploration in your local machine. So, so this is the Python API that I'm talking about, that the custom activities are interacting, right? So as the, so let's go through what's happening under the hood in this API. So first, it gets the, you see my API there, but it's fine. So first it gets the first source, right? So what happens there? It's the first row, and it gets the first source, which is the DUQ items, and it was able, and based on the question that I asked, it was able to get the most relevant chunk that is right here. And the one that you can see here, this is my prompt template, right? This is a system prompt template, your help assistant. And again, I made this as generic as possible. You can answer from documentations, video transcripts, such as the following text delimited by dashes. So this is coming from the vector database semantic similarity, right? And then the question would be provide response to the question. So this was my question in the first row, right? So basically, this is the full view of the prompt that I'm pushing into OpenAI in this case. And this is the output from the LLM, right? And then the next row would be the next row would be yeah. So the next row would still use this same context, right? And then this is the different question. And then if you can see here, so another thing aside from the context, if you can see here in the, so I'm outputting my as a verbose, right? If you can see here, this is also adding the chat history right here, right? So as I started the session, it doesn't have chat history during the first let's say question. Now, as I ask the sequential question, it's able to build up the chat history and include in the prompt. So this chat history is automatically being built through LangChain. You just provide what type of memory you want to have. So in this case, I'm using conversation buffer memory, which is basically providing all the chat history. So that's what's happening under the hood. And then if you look at the AI response, so these are the unique queue items, top 3 items, and what time. So this took around 1400 minutes. And what was my last question? Just to show what yeah, okay, so it's finished. So just to show what how the memory functions, right? So it was able to get my last question. So just to showcase the memory, right? And then next I asked, I provided another document. So it uses ingest knowledge source and then summarizes appointment. So it didn't summarize this one, but instead summarize this one because this is the new source that I want to interact with, right? So this is a renewal appointment, for example, and then I ask this confirmation number. It easily extracted that confirmation number. So that's why it's also can be used to extract from unstructured entities. And then the video is the last piece, right? So it was able to load. One thing that is also very useful in LangChain is what we call loaders, right? So they have specific loaders for different sources, and one of which is a YouTube transcript loader. So it was able to summarize this video link just by providing the link. And then the last thing I ask is summarize the whole conversation. So conversation began listing unique items, blah, blah, blah. So basically it summarized all these things, right? So how does this work? I mentioned earlier how this combines different components such as the context injection, semantic similarity, and large language model and memory in LLM chain. But what I did for this solution is in order to make it very like user friendly, right? So it's basically just this activity working in the background, ingest knowledge source and converse with context. And so basically the idea is to ingest any type of source, right? You just provide a source, generate embeddings, push into the vector store, and then with that source as a reference, you can use converse with context and provide just the name of that source, right? And then you provide the query, right? So very basic, but it would require you to, of course, interact with an existing vector database. In this case, I'm using Pinecone. So you have to create. I'll be creating a detailed guide about this, so you can use this. So it's using Pinecone to be able to uh, as a vector store for the embeddings, right? So just to quickly show you, cannot see this. Yeah, so this is my Pinecone environment. So in Pinecone, you have indices, and in that indices, you have what I did is each document or each file are tagged as namespace, right? So basically, what are the vectors that you can see here? Vectors are basically the numerical representations of the contents of the document, right? The text. In this case, if I look at this one, and I just query this real quick. So these are the vectors, right? If you can see here, so this is one vector that contains 1536 columns or dimensions, right? Because the embeddings that are generated are 1536 dimensions. So basically, if I open this 0 to 100 column, so these are just numbers, but basically this translates to this particular text. So each vector right here is one row in the vector database table, one row with 1536 dimensions, right? So meaning this particular text, which is 1000 word token, right, is equivalent to this different numbers that only the computer can understand, right? And again, this is being used for semantic search in order for you or for the model to be able to, let's say, do semantic search of similarity. And this is what the, let's say, doc contents look like, right? So these are being chunked into different string, right? And when I do semantic similarity, let's say my question is, what is the agenda? So it will go to every and parts of the, let's say, it will just fetch this part this part, and then this part, if I only specify, let's say, top 3 chunks, right? And then this is what will be fed back into the model along with the question, right? So that's basically how it works. And just wary of the time, I'll continue on with the demo, right? I'm going to show you the next part. So, okay. So now that you see what's happening under the hood, let's now see how you can scale this into any types of use cases that you want to take your LLM-powered automation to the next level. So any conversational and transactional use case around document Q&A, custom knowledge base, summarization, extraction, etc. So there's a surplus of these use cases around custom knowledge base interaction. But is there an available framework that we can use? So now this is the framework. Now from the custom activity, now we're talking about the framework, and again, it can be used for conversational, which I will show a quick demo, and transactional type of use cases. Let's say you have documents or files or databases where you can feed into the framework, and these are different activities that I mentioned. So you have the selection of different LLM. You have the ingest knowledge source, context-aware, multi-input chain. Again, multi-input because it has memory, it has LLM, it has prompt template, it has the context built in. And another one that I'm planning to build in the future is the Ask Agent. So it's like another type of chain where it follows the concept of reasoning and acting, right? So it observes, it provides observation, specific input, and provides its thought and provides how to act, basically, right? And this is Python API backend. You can host this via Docker. I have a Docker image that I can share when I publish this marketplace. And this is basically the framework, right? It resembles RA framework because I'm also using some RA framework components, but mostly I updated this so that it could be able to have these different LLM interaction components, initializing source, and basically the goal is to use this framework for both conversational and transactional use cases, similar to the pattern that Dhruv mentioned earlier, right? So let's go with the first type of use case the first mode, what I call chat mode or conversation mode. So this framework has sample implementation, right? Right here, we'll just run this in debug, right? So this is a very quick and dirty implementation of a chat mode where I created a form, and then using this LLM framework, I could be able to run it in chat mode, right? But same concept, it's ingest, then converse, basically. So now it's initializing all settings before showing the form, and now it has the form. So this is, again, sample form, which you will be able to, which is part of the framework. This is a studio template. I'll be deploying this as a studio template. And this form has different triggers, right? So each of this trigger corresponds to a specific activity that it's calling in the custom activity that I showed. So create vector from source. Basically, when you click this, right, it will be able to trigger this SAML file, which is basically calling the LLM framework, and the LLM framework contains the the ingest knowledge source, right? I'll show that in a bit, right? And then so I can choose a file. For example, I have this robot logs, right? And then I create from vector source. So basically, it goes to the LLM framework, goes to the initialization, or yeah, just goes to this trigger. And then goes to the Yeah, goes to the initialization. So this is the LLM framework already, and then ingest knowledge source, right? So I showed you this activity earlier. So this is the same activity that's used inside the LLM framework. Or I think it's let's try that again. So basically, the conversational scenario is if ingesting knowledge, it goes through here and then ends the interaction, right? So if you notice, right, on the press create vector right here, I'm only providing the source when calling the LLM framework, right? Right here. I only provide the source path and then the transaction mode is false. So this is heavily documented, right? So how you can trigger transactional and conversational mode. So basically it goes from here, ingesting knowledge source and then end interaction. So when you press send, it calls the same LLM framework, right? But now it doesn't have the source, but just the user message, and source is stored in a global variable, right? And this is how it converts with context, and it's iterative, right? If you have 10 questions, it will iterate 10 times, or just interaction with LLM framework, right? So this is how it looks like, again, for the conversational mode, right? For you can have any type of user interface. In this case, I use a form, and then you choose the document and create vector store and uses the custom activity, and uses this path, right? From initialize to ending, leaving out of the LLM framework, and then for asking, right? You ask the question, it will use this activity, retain conversation memory, use the knowledge, and then provide contextual response. Right? So that's conversational, right? You can these are the currently supported sources. And for the transactional, right? Think of it as an RE framework, because if for example, this contracts extraction example, so you can actually this is a student template, as I said. You can use this template and create once I publish this. And then how to use this as a transactional, right? So you can set this transaction mode to true and then provide a query for your transaction. So imagine you have a queue, right, which has a, sorry, I'm breezing through the demo because I see there only 4 minutes. But yeah, let's say you have a queue right here, which has your contracts, or the one that I will show is this one, right? So I want to consume this queue, right? And what I will do is just provide the query. In this case, my query or prompt would be something like this. So in a transactional use case, you just provide your fixed query that will be run from on your all your transaction. Maybe this can come from the prompt engineering framework that you use. That is also in the marketplace, which Dhruv mentioned. So basically, this is my query, right? Summarize the contract and enumerate vendor deliverables. Provide deliverable output as JSON array that contains the following keys: section number and verbiage, where section number is a section article where the verbiage is description from, and verbiage is the actual text depicting the service. And then you can also provide the the output format and say that this is only send the JSON output as a response. So if I run this, hold on, let me run this as a Docker container. Then I will run this just like how you would run the RE framework. So this is the performer basically. So I'll run this file. And then while that's running, so I'll quickly walk you through the different states in this framework. So again, you have the initialization, which contains the ingest knowledge source, right? Similar to RE framework. So you have all this, and then you have I added this initialized source, which has the ingest knowledge source. And then once it ingests the knowledge source here, you will have this LLM interaction, which uses the converse with context and this interact with LLM, which is basically this one. So if it's transaction mode, right, it will you do the ingestion here and then converse with context. If it's conversational mode, you have the source already in the initialization, it will just converse with context. And then if you notice, there's this reusable component that I have right here. If you look at the framework, so before I show that by the framework, right? So this is for you to determine which, if you want for transaction mode, if you want for human validation to perform actions downstream, let's say interacting with your any applications, or do some post-processing response. So each of these has a placeholder that you can customize here. And for this sample implementation, I have a sample implementation action center task, which basically so the run already completed. So this is how the task looks like. So this is simulating a human in the loop scenario, right? I feed the with just providing that prompt that I have here, it ingested, let's say, imagine this is a 100-page contract, right? I cannot feed this in full into the LLM model, so it uses ingest knowledge source to get the most relevant chunks and provide the summary, right? And then I was asking about the deliverables and applications, so it provided this as a JSON, which I parsed from the workflow and shows this, right? And there are other ways. So basically, there are lots of other use cases that you can do here. So this one is an indemnification review, right? So so this is another type of use case, and you'd be able to do either again conversational or transactional type of use case, whatever use case that you want to accomplish that deals with interacting or with your own data. So I guess I'm over time, so sorry about that. So that's probably kind of I'll have a follow-up video tutorial of how this works. So any questions that you need to answer?
If you have any questions, please feel free to take yourself off mute. You have one comment saying, yes, a tutorial video would be great. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll follow up on that. So yeah, I know we have limited time as well. So yeah, I try to speed up as I can. And yeah.
You did a great job.
Great job today, Russell and Dhruv. There's one question that's pending by Shreya. She wants to know when Clipboard AI will be in general availability. Would either of you know? Shreya, why don't I take her details and I can get back to you on that. Oh, that's all the questions that I see on chat. So if we don't have any other questions, we can conclude our session and our 3-day series. Thank you once again, Russell and Dhruv and Diana, and thank you everyone who attended all of our series. The links are in the chat or will be on the community.uipath.com page. So thank you, everybody, and hope you have a good rest of your day and a good weekend.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.